Welcome all hunters, anglers, trappers, and shooters to the only fish and wildlife conservation podcast that goes behind the scenes of the business of conservation, the Connecting with Conservation podcast. Our podcast is hosted by Jon Gassett from the Wildlife Management Institute and Jim Curcuruto of the Outdoor Stewards of Conservation Foundation. Jon and Jim will talk with experts from all sectors of the conservation arena about their passion for conserving the great outdoors. So please welcome our hosts of the Connecting with Conservation podcast, Jon and Jim.
Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Connecting with Conservation, the only podcast that goes behind the scenes to look at the business of conservation in our country. I'm Jon Gassett with the Wildlife Management Institute, and I'm your co-host for Connecting with Conservation. Here this morning with my friend and co-host Jim Curcuruto from Outdoor Stewards. Jim, how you doing this morning?
Good. A little tired. We started early this morning, but that kind of makes sense for the topic we're going to be talking about. But I tell you what, Connecting with Conservation podcast, we get to talk a lot of cool stuff regarding conservation, whether it's hunting, fishing, trapping, or shooting. And then there's so many different types of hunting and so many things to go after fishing and shooting and trapping. So we never seem to run out of topics for sure. But today we get to talk about one of my favorite topics, turkey hunting. And we've got a guy that knows a heck of a lot about it and a relatively new organization that to me is doing such a great job. And I wanted to learn more about it. So I reached out to Jason Lupardus, who's the CEO of Turkeys for Tomorrow. And I'm very excited to have you on. So welcome, Jason. Why don't you start off by telling us about the first time you went turkey hunting?
Oh Lord! I mean, is it early enough to tell that story?
You're still in diapers.
I tell you what. I mean, I was crawling with a pacifier thinking about it. No, honestly, guys. I mean, I grew up in an area, Northwest Alabama, and if anyone knows anything about turkeys, it's probably the black hole for turkeys. It's one of the lowest turkey populations in the nation, is in those two counties, Lauderdale, Limestone County. You can look on the Alabama DCNR map and you can go, man, that sucks. Why are you into turkeys? Well, maybe because I never saw one till I think I was 17 years old. One of my first turkey hunt with a gentleman, I was in a hunting club with a fella, and he said, hey, let's go down to the WMA and we're going to try to get on a turkey. And I'm like, man, I don't even know how to turkey call. I mean, what do you do? And so back in the day, you rented a video, right? And you watched it. There was no YouTube. There was no internet. This is old school days. And so yeah, we watched something crazy and bought my first call, which was a Nightingale push-pull call. Still have one of the two. It's a 2-pack. Beep, beep, beep. Worked pretty damn good because I did not know how to turkey call. And so, man, I loaded that thing up, had a shotgun. We went out into Freedom Hills, WMA, okay, down in Cherokee, Alabama, one of the few places that had turkeys. And so we got down there and literally in the dark, we walking in. He's like, man, I think we take a right here. And it's going to take us where I saw the scratching. I'm like, okay, sure. And we're walking and it's turning daylight. And I'm looking around going, man, I don't know where we are. Had no clue where we were. And it's breaking daylight. And now I see like across the holler, a tree stand, like an old box stand. I'm like, this ain't good. I don't think we're on public ground right now. And so the other fella had split on the other side of the holler and I was like, well, I'm just going to sit here and wait on him. Well, two turkey hunters from private land come up and I'm trying to turkey call. And I didn't know I had no clue what I was doing. I was making some sounds and I didn't hear a turkey. And so these two older gentlemen come down. They're going, hey, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm trying to turkey call and I think I'm lost. And they just laughed at me. And they're like, yep, we can tell you we're not a turkey. And I said, nope. And number two, about a half mile that way is where you're supposed to be. And I said, man, I am so sorry. And they're like, hey, no problem. People get lost all the time. And he's like, hey, are you alone? And what? No, there's another guy way over yonder somewhere. And I said, I'll get him. So anywho, first turkey hunt, total failure. But yeah, no turkeys killed that day. Not a feather harmed. And learned a lot about that place but yeah, subsequently, many years later, tried to figure out turkey hunting there. Was not good. I was down in central Alabama a little bit later around Pelham, Alabama, and was actually on another property to deer hunt, and it had a ton of turkeys on it. And I just remember sitting in the stand and just listening to these birds on the roost all the time. And I got pretty good at mimicking calls just with my mouth, just listening to these birds. And so, come spring season, my first spring season, I knew where these roosts were. Been watching, really got into turkey hunting. Didn't have anyone showing me anything. It was just one of those real natural kind of interactions. And literally got way too close to the roost. Happened to be some jakes. Had them to fly over me, land on the ground, and I turned around the tree like a good old hillbilly, and I shot one. And buddy, after that, I was hooked. But we had a ton of birds there gobbling, and that was probably one of the best springs I'll ever remember that really got me into turkey hunting. But I learned the hard school way. It's not like today, like, hey, you get a line, we show you how it's done. There is none of that back in the day. It was just like, figure it out. So, beautiful day, man. Beautiful day.
So, Jason, I have one question for you. I grew up in a very similar situation in Northwest Georgia. No turkeys growing up. I saw the first one when I was 16 or 17, and I didn't have a club that then had turkey hunting. So, I went down near Fort Benning with my cousin. Didn't know anything about calling turkeys. Like you said, I don't know Lynch calling, listen to the cassette tape on how to call, how to make that work. And my question did, and I got a bird, same thing. Jake's in the tree, flew across and, flew over me and lit behind me and turned around, shot one, almost identical to the way you described it. My question to you is, who was surprised more, you or the first turkey?
Tell you what, I think I was surprised more.
I was too. I was like,
man,
how in the heck did that just happen? I made some horrible sounds. The birds flew out just like they're supposed to and lit behind me, and I shot one. And I'm like, I don't know how that came together, because it was, and my cousin down the hill from me did the exact same thing with another group of jakes. So it's like, after that we were hooked. So,
well, I tell you, man, sometimes God puts you in the right place at the right time, and that's just how I see things, and it's how I've lived my life. And so sometimes you just got to walk through those doors. And I had a real dark door down there because I didn't know a thing about turkey hunting, but it's pretty cool. After that, I just wanted to go, and I don't know how many times I messed up, but a bunch, because I just didn't know. But gosh, all those lessons learned back in the day really, helped me move along. And and I'm gonna tell another turkey story because we're talking turkeys now. But when I was down in Georgia, South Georgia, early in my career working for the state agency down there as a private lands biologist, my boss man, a great fella, heck of a turkey man, heck of a woodsman, Mr. Reggie Thaxton, was like, hear you having a hard time killing turkeys down here. And I said, yeah, I mean, I'm starting up high like I do in the mountains, and I work my way down. And, down South Georgia, the mountain is like a foot high, right? You got a little hill. And I'm thinking like, hey, this pine sand will kill me. He's like, this is the best knowledge he ever gave me. And this is a quick quote. And he sounds like one of the Oak Ridge boys, so I'm not even going to try that. But he's like, if you can put your hand in the water, you'll kill a turkey. And that's all he told me. And I was like, So I thought about that for a bit. And I'm like, I need to be down there in the mud flats. I need to be like on them. And sure enough, after I started setting up a little bit lower, starting the day, all of a sudden I'm like, man, I killed 3 birds in a day. How'd I do that? Oh, man, 2 days this year. Wow. They are all right there. But that was a big lesson learned for me. Different habitat type, different place. And just that one little hint was all I needed. And I'm like, okay, I got you. Good stuff.
Well, I see you got to grow up the traditional way outside, enjoying nature like that. And it looks like then you went to school to kind of continue that passion. And tell us a little bit about your personal history growing up and then getting into where you are now.
I tell you what, the University of Tennessee was fantastic. I grew up very rural, in a place called Frog Pond. You may not be able to find it on a map. Center Star, we get a little bit bigger. Killen, Alabama, we get a little bit bigger. Florence, between Florence and Huntsville, middle of nowhere. I think I grew up barefooted till I had to wear shoes. Had like leather feet, but always out doing stuff. And I always say that the outdoors really saved my life, because that's where I wanted to be, and it's where I felt most comfortable, and really put me in a really good place when things at home were not so good. And so, very blessed to have an outdoor lifestyle growing up. Didn't really have anyone show me how to hunt. I didn't have a father in my life growing up, and so I didn't have that dad that was taking me hunting. Now I did have a great grandmother that loved to fish, and that was my gateway drug to getting outdoors with something in hand. And I remember as a young man always having a fishing pole, and if I go out walking looking for quote unquote arrowheads out in the old field, I'm taking my fishing poles. I'm going to get to that creek before the end of the day and drop a line in the water. And so that's where I really cut my teeth as a very young man. Just the background, being out every day, loving it, and didn't have any clue that there was a whole, opportunity in the outdoors to have a job. And so I think I come up on that a little bit later than most. I started college on a scholarship to be a chemical engineer, actually. And so went in 3 years at the University of North Alabama, and then had some life moments hit and an awakening. And I'm like, what am I doing? And took a step out, made a move, and then wasn't too long after I'm at the University of Tennessee, kind of heading toward a pathway of something I really wanted to do. And once I found that, I'm like, man, I really love this. This is fantastic. Like, I was moving in the engineer arena because I grew up. I mean, I'm one of those guys that didn't have what everyone else had, and I wanted to get ahead in life. And so I thought, man, I'm really good at chemistry and I'm good at math. I'm just going to do something and make a lot of money and move on. But it wasn't my passion. And so to be able to get this passion out toward the outdoors and conservation, it was beautiful. So I took a journey at the University of Tennessee as an undergraduate. Happened to just kind of fall into an elk hole, which I think Gassett knows a lot about. And so yeah, ended up working for Dr. Muller, Lisa Muller, on a project, and we jumped in and actually helped write a science grant, which is crazy. I probably never, ever put my name on one of those again because I'd never get it. But we got a grant, and literally she's like, hey, whatever kind of project you want to do, it's yours. So I was helping work on that as an undergraduate. So I stepped right into a graduate program and blazed through that. And then got lost down in Georgia for a number of years. And that was really good. So.
All right. Well, I'll tell my turkey story too, since everybody else. I think there's a lot of similar stories like this out there. I was Putnam County, New York, 40 miles north of New York City. And I grew up squirrel hunting and then deer hunting. There was nothing in between. There were no turkeys around. I never saw a turkey, never heard of turkey. And then, I kind of grew up, went to school, and came back in the area. And my dad's, there's turkeys around now. And he had been turkey hunting once or twice. Sure, there is, Dad, right? And he's like, yeah, come with me. I was okay. Well, because I was a squirrel hunter and a deer hunter, my hunting apparel was orange, right? So I looked around. I had a brown Carhartt jacket, and I had some brown work pants. I had, what am I going to kill a turkey with if we see a turkey, right? And it was a Browning Satori over and under. I had some pheasant loads, number 6 or something like that. I'll go hunting with Dad. We're not going to kill a turkey or anything like that. And sit down, and he has the worst looking plastic decoys you probably could imagine. Look more like a vulture than a turkey. And I scratched out a couple things, and all of a sudden a gobble, and I was like, whoop! Like immediately, and then gobble back and forth, and these 2 jakes come running in, and the winner of the race was the loser, and was on our dinner table. And immediately the next day I went out and bought a Mossberg turkey thug and camo pattern and chokes and this, and it was like money for conservation. But that's what's so important about turkeys for tomorrow and all these conservation organizations, because there's a reason why there weren't turkeys, and there's a reason why there are turkeys. And that's the science-based work that y'all do. So tell us a little bit about the foundation or the start of Turkeys for Tomorrow, and why it started and where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So Turkeys for Tomorrow is we're almost 5 years old. Come this February, we'll hit the 5-year-old mark. We're relatively young in the conservation arena. It really started with a bunch of guys that got together in the outdoor industry and they were just like, hey, we're not hearing turkeys like we used to. And where are the turkeys? What's going on? Primarily here in the southeastern U.S. And so that really stimulated some action. And these folks were not wanting to start an organization. All they wanted to do was like bring back turkeys. And so they were reaching out to anyone and everyone, whether it was a governmental agency or a nonprofit that did turkey work, to try to come up with some solutions. And they're just not getting answers. And no one really had anything for them but, hey, it's cyclical, it's going to be fine, dot, 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 dot. Well, that's just not the truth. I mean, so those 14 people all pitched in a little bit of money. I think it was $300 a pop, and said, hey, we're going to start a nonprofit and just put money towards wild turkey research. And so it started to be a seriously science-based focus, which is fantastic. And so they had the correct mentality. But what they found when they started talking about it, and this was right around the COVID time, it garnered a ton of interest. And there are a lot of folks that were like, man, I'm not hearing turkeys in my place either. And yeah, man, I'm having problems here. And so all of a sudden, a lot of people in the general public started talking about it, going, hey, we got a similar issue. What's going on? And so behind the scenes, there was some of us, and I was one of those guys attending a lot of these meetings in the past. First meeting I attended was 2012. We talked about wild turkey decline. I think that was in Louisiana at the Southeastern Wild Turkey Working Group. And it wasn't publicly known then. And so there's a lot that's happened between then and now. But TFT formed, and literally then we had people going, hey, we want to join. How can we be a member? What can we do to help? And so they're like, oh my gosh, this is more than we thought. And so things started growing, and they decided to really make this into a true nonprofit. I stepped in about 2.5 years ago. I come in I was missing the turkey work. I worked for the National Wild Turkey Federation for about a decade. Loved the work, left for some personal reasons, and moved on to some greener pastures for a bit. And then when I heard that TFT was in this place where I heard they needed some help, and so me and another colleague reached out to some board members, and we had a discussion, and they're like, oh man, y'all got a lot of turkey background. I'm like, well, yeah, a lot. And so I pitched in to help with a grant initially. Wasn't working for them or anything. And I said, hey, let me just look at it. And so they're trying to do something with the Cherokee Nation out of Oklahoma. And so that was the first step. Then next thing you know, I got an invite like, well, hey, are you for hire? And I said, well, I'm doing some consulting right now. I'm kind of liking it. And so I said, yeah, I'll come down. So I met with them, pitched a contract just to really try to help, lift the organization and establish a better framework for success. And so that was really my goal. I thought I might be on a year or two and then just slide out. And then within a few months, I had several of the board members go, hey, you probably need to be running this thing because this has gotten out of our hands and this thing is about to go. And I said, okay. I said, let me finish out my contract and then I'll let you know. And so I worked a 1-year contract and then stepped back in. But it all come from TFT, formed from passionate turkey hunters that care about turkeys. And they're just a bunch of doggone conservationists that want to get something done and tired of hearing the rhetoric. So let's do something. And so we stimulate us to do a whole lot of wild turkey research. We're at a much different place today, almost 5 years later, and we have a lot of growth. We have a lot of interest, not only in this country, but we have interest out of Canada. We just got back from New Zealand from a grant that I put in there, and then also interest in Mexico to try to help. But our growth is through the roof right now with followers and members. Our demographics is much different than most. We're primarily 20 and 30-year-olds. I'm kind of the old man of the bunch, which is crazy. But if you looked at there is no like beautiful, bell curve here. It's 20, 30-year-olds, and it slowly goes down toward baby boomers. And so what that tells me and any kind of business is that if you're doing it correctly, we're going to have people for the next 20 to 30 years wanting to help. And that's a big deal. And so we're taking models from several organizations where I've seen that it works effectively. And so like Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, think that group was one of the fastest growing conservation groups out there. And we've taken a very, very easy model of doing social events to get people together to be interested in turkeys. And so, and what we're seeing is we're having huge turnouts. I have an event I'm going down to Savannah, Georgia next week. We're doing an oyster roast. We'll probably have 100 people show up. We're doing like a brewery night in Birmingham, Alabama the next week. And so we're doing some fun things, and it really connects to the generations that we feel that can really make a difference in the future. And we're getting a lot of people come to the table. And so we've had some events that we're not fundraising. We're not trying to force anyone to do something. We're just like, we want to get to know you. And if we can get you plugged in to do something, fantastic. And that's it. And so it's a soft approach. It's worked effectively. We had one in Jackson, Tennessee. We had over 150 people show up. So people care and they want to do something.
Well, Jason, so you mentioned, the regional decline. And so I guess one good thing that came out of the regional decline is turkeys for tomorrow. But let's talk a little bit more about that, because that's one of the things that concerns a lot of us with turkeys. And, you mentioned Reggie Thaxton earlier, who's no quail biologist, colleague of mine. Known Reggie for years, but, I understand the cyclical argument, but usually those are pretty short duration type things. That cycle is pretty short duration. Even grouse, they're on a 7 years, typically or historically on a 7-year cycle, but you don't see things that are 20, 30, 40-year cycles. The last thing that we saw that declined like that was the bobwhite, the northern bobwhite. And, we know now that, it was, habitat for bobwhite improved with farm abandonment, with the Great Depression. You had all these farms growing up, all this early successional habitat. And when the economy got better, farmers started farming again. They got aggregated and into bigger and bigger farms, and they did more clean farming. So, I'm worried a little bit, although I know there are a lot of factors out there that might be involved with turkeys. Maybe there's something like that behind the scenes that we hadn't identified yet. That I always worry about the slow burn declines much more than the quick drop. You get a quick drop one year, the next, you could have had a wet spring, poor hatch. There's lots of things there, but you don't see that long, slow decline like I think we're seeing with those type of factors. What are you hearing and seeing?
Well, I agree. I think we've disease tested birds and tried to survey that in multiple regions and even replicated those, and we're just really not finding that silver bullet, and so that's good. I'm just going to go ahead and throw that out the door real quick, just so people know that. But over time, everyone said, "Hey, it's just habitat," and I don't know if it's just habitat, to be honest with you. I think there's a lot of things to unwrap on the onion here, right? We start peeling this back, and there's several factors. Everything kills a turkey. Everything likes a turkey, including me. People ask, like, "Hey, why do you want to have more turkeys?" Because I want to chase more of them, and there's no doubt about it. But the reality is, I think there's several factors. No doubt, I think with fragmentation, more people be on the landscape, it's impacting the structural habitat out there in a way. And we know as a fact, we just don't have enough nesting and brood range in most any state. There's a fact for habitat. Most places it's not roosting sites unless we get to some of the western states, but that's definitely the easy one to talk about. But the one that's more complicated is we start talking about two other things that we're focused on is really predation. And we know that birds, we know that, so many nests are getting pulled off in each state in all these studies, and it should be enough to see a boom in the population, or we should see an increase. Our average hen to poult ratios, which tell us what the population is doing here in the coastal plain of the United States, we see the poult per hen ratios at a very poor level. So a 1-to-2 ratio for every hen that brings 2 poults to be adults, that's a stable population. It means it's not going up or down. If you look at the coastal plain, there's some new information that's going to be presented really soon. I've got to take a peek at it, but if you look at the coastal plain of the United States and then kind of up the East Coast and a few other areas, you see some what I call black holes where that production is still in decline over time. That concerns me. And so You think about habitat structure in the coastal plain, much different than when you start going further north. The lower understory structure changes pretty dramatically. And I honestly think that predation numbers are definitely a part of that, where birds are getting picked off more easily over time. And, if we look back, I love to talk about Missouri when we hit on this, because Missouri is the perfect state to talk about how the turkey population boomed, bigger than any other state out there. And it's a lot of correlation, right? But at the time, there was no real science going to it. But we look back at some of the predator studies going on where through scent stations. It's kind of interesting. Predator numbers were at their lowest, but we also had a state that had a lot of trapping going on. And if everyone knows this, the state of Missouri is moving more furs than any other state in the nation. Fact. No getting around it. And so if we start looking at some of that and we start looking back at the correlation and looking at those scent surveys, the only state that was doing it at the time, long-term survey, and predator numbers were low, we're averaging a 1-to-7 to 1-to-8 recruitment rate, okay? Hen to poult ratios. It's not like we're just growing. That's called intrinsic growth. Very fast, okay? In some of the states that had late introductions, as far as birds being reintroduced, we still see growth, but it's not at that level. And so the whole adage of, hey, with a reintroduction of species, it's going to climb super fast and tail back off. Yes, but when you compare and contrast, there was something else going on. Maybe correlation here, may be wrong, but all's pointing that way. And so some of the studies done over in Europe, which no one tends to want to look outside the United States when it comes to research, but let's look to Europe for a minute on what they've done with a little bit of predator management and what that means to quote-unquote ground nesting songbird populations, shorebird populations, etc. We see a ton of upward movement. We can kind of caterpillar growth in a different direction. So I think that's some of it. We're trying to address that. We're about to stand up a study that's like none ever done with 4 major universities, Tall Timbers, National Trapper Association, National Trappers Foundation, us, and some others over 8 states. It's kind of a big deal. It hasn't even been publicly announced till maybe kind of now. So it's a big deal, and we're going to do a big predator prey study. And so hopefully to help adjust that. The third thing I'm going to talk about is harvest. Turkey harvest and additive mortality. And I think it's very important. It's something I don't like talking about as I'm a hunter, and I tend to add to mortality sometimes. But what we don't control from a statewide standpoint, we look at a state agency trying to manage a resource, is that, hey, each hunter can harvest X amount of birds per season, right? Let's use Kentucky. It's a prime example. We can harvest 2 birds a person per spring season. Great. Well, what if I'm on my 50 acres and John, you're on your 100 acres, and let's start just divvying this up. Let's say we're in a community where we have a lot of 50, 100 acre tracts, which is more about where we stand. It's Kentucky, right? So let's say everybody's hunting on those tracts, but now I'm also letting both of my kids hunt. You're letting your kids hunt, and everyone else is bringing someone. I'm bringing my dad and whomever. So my theory is that we're seeing some isolated pockets of decline because we're over harvesting birds at a local level. And if we think about what the land will hold from a science standpoint, we can only produce so many birds on a per square mile basis. And so we know on poor habitat how many birds we should be harvesting on a per square mile basis, moderate habitat, and then really good habitat. Now, we break that down to a square mile, 640 acres, and let's say we have let's have a lot of fun. Let's say we have 10 landowners in a square mile. Can all 10 of them really be harvesting birds, especially if there's multiple people? I'm going to tell you what happens. We kill out cohorts of birds. And then, Gassett, you're like, man, I ain't seen my birds back. Where the hell did they go? Well, the thing is, if you got gobblers to come back and it takes them years to figure out where they want to roost and where they want to go, etc., they're not bringing anything back anytime soon. And so I think we're seeing some isolated pockets decline. Now, we can add on all the other factors out there. Feeders been around every corner, high levels predation, aflatoxins not directly killing birds, but indirectly through liver damage, etc. There's a ton of things that's being very impactful on turkey populations, but when you start adding it all together, I think that's where we start seeing issues. And so I think as we start unpacking some of this, if we had a sea of great habitat and our predator numbers a little lower, and we could artificially get numbers back up, just like in the quail arena. I mean, I'll tell you, down south when we're doing work on the largest plantations of 20,000 plus acres to a 500-acre WMA, if we did a little bit of predator work and habitat work, man, we're pushing a lot of quail birds, okay? And down south, if you ain't pushing 6 to 7 coveys an hour, you don't have a job, right? But we've seen quail populations bolster from a 10 to 15% increase in 1 year by trapping selectively 2.5 weeks prior to nest initiation. You're basically opening up a window to get that, hen protected on the ground. The interesting thing with all this, back when I was doing a ton of quail work, is I was seeing a pile of turkeys on these places. And I think it's that management scheme, good habitat, a little bit of predator management. We get numbers up to where we're happy with them, we're good. Some things you don't have to do year after year, but you always have to be doing something. And so the argument about, hey, predator work costs more than habitat work. And I'm like, no. Do you know how much it costs per acre to restore on habitat? It's not cheap. And it doesn't just stay there for affinity. And so I think all this stuff is active management, and we just have to get comfortable doing it again, inclusive of talking to people at a local level going, hey, because you got 4 guys hunting on your property, you may not want to try to harvest all 4 of your gobblers. We got to leave a gobbler or 2 for the next year. And so it's trying to educate people and get them associated with what's going on at the local level. I think it's going to be most important.
So Jason, just to
now you got me preaching.
Follow up to that, 'cause that's you hit right on the 3 or 4 key things I've thought might be a factor here. One is obviously predator management. I'm a trapper. I've been a trapper since I was an adult. I'm a commercial nuisance trapper now, so I've seen what these populations of mostly ground nesting predators done: raccoons, skunks, possums, tons of snakes. Those sorts of things have really exploded. But I've thought about the long-term decline could be attributed to not just a combination of things, but those things working in concert. In other words, you can have great habitat, but when you have a surplus of predators, they're still going to eat. Even in good habitat, they can find nests. All right, they're not as efficient, but there's a lot more of them, so you still have a net loss. The other thing is you're changing turkey behaviors as feeders have become more prevalent. Now you take a bird that's used to avoiding predators by navigating good habitat and finding natural foods, bringing them out largely into openings to eat at these feeders, which exposes them to predators even more so. And those, I've got feeders, and Jim's got feeders. I don't know if you do or not, but it's just what everybody does now. But I wonder about the unintended consequences of drawing animals. Obviously, we put them there to draw animals out, the legal animals. We won't hunt turkeys over them, but draw deer out for our hunters to shoot. But you're drawing all kinds of wildlife out there into the open where they're exposed and they're in. I've actually done some behavioral observations that animals that feed on natural foods tend to be much more alert, especially deer. I'm talking about deer now. They're looking, their heads are not down very long. They're picking things up and they're watching. You put some corn in a field and they're head down, for minutes at a time sometimes. So they're less aware of what's going on around them. And I've just wondered, just in my adult life, I've seen, going from where nobody could feed wildlife to where everybody's feeding wildlife. And where back then lots of people trapped to where nobody traps. And those two things may be converging to create the perfect storm.
I agree with you, man. You nailed it. I think that especially because turkeys, they have evolved through imprinting. And so they're even more challenged than other species. So over time, whether it is birds, like I've worked on some tracks where I've helped basically restore it, like landscape level restoration. And birds just don't go back to good habitat overnight. The adage of create great habitat and they'll come, and I used to preach that, but let me tell you what, I had an awakening. I had a Jesus moment. And Jesus said, you are wrong. And so what I have seen is that when we do habitat at a scale, birds just don't jump into it. If this hen, and this all is very much verified with GPS birds that have they have this high site fidelity to go right back to the same area year after year, whether it's successful or not, whether they almost die or not, they will go back to this. It's within a 5-acre area year after year. It's pretty amazing. Same thing. So if it's a dense pine stand that they grow up in and they learn that, what I've seen on a few tracks that I've helped manage is once we do a lot of cutting, thinning, the birches don't show up. They are actually hanging out in these young, dense pine stands. And I tell this story a lot because it's a 3,000-acre tract to help manage down in around Auburn, Alabama. And with a good friend of mine, hunt with for years. He's an avid turkey hunter. And he asked me to come down, start helping manage. We're moving this property along. It looks great. You're like, man, there ought to be bobwhites whistling everywhere, etc. And the last time I went down there, after we did all this thinning, openings look good. They're burning. Everything you want to do, you're like, man, there's going to be turkeys everywhere. I heard 2 turkeys in 4 days, and neither one of those birds were on the property. And it bothered me. I spent one day, I walked 15 miles one day just walking roads, looking at tracks, and looking around going, man, I ain't seeing any turkey tracks. Now, I'm seeing a lot of predator tracks. And so I think oftentimes we don't think about the scale of things too. And so things happen really quickly. And when that happens at a micro scale, you got a lot of rodents, a lot of insects, everything kind of boom, 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 boom. Well, turkeys, because of evolution, because of imprinting, they're going back over here what they've been in the last 15 years because that's what they know. And so now this great habitat is now creating a ton of mesopredators. A ton of raptors are coming in. And now for them to get back into this good habitat and to slowly adopt to it, now they got even a bigger wall. So I think there's some bigger challenges that we have not even addressed at a scale. And with all these feeders been out, we're doing a study with Dr. Goolsby out of Auburn to address this with feeders, actually, to try to come up with some recommendations like maybe you ought to get a few dog proofs and put around your feeders. Because we know we're feeding a whole lot of possums, raccoons, everything else coming around there. It's just targeted on that feeder. And Gassett, you're right. Critters get stupid. Once they get on the welfare system, I won't tell you.
Hard to get them
It's
off.
a lost cause.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Well, Jason, I tell you what, I learned a lot, and I'm so appreciative of all the stuff that you and John, and it's funny that you said John was right about something. I was like, oh man, he is though. I mean, and wildlife biologists are doing the work, and they're trying to figure out the puzzle. But so what can hunters do? Because I know the vast majority of hunters want to do the right thing. And also what can non-hunters do? Because connecting with conservation, we've got a broad audience mix, and, landowners or something. What can they do right now?
I'll tell you what, and this is the hot topic, but if people would just stop feeding wildlife, period, now it's going to hurt some feelings here. Number one, whether you're a hunter or non-hunter, that's a big deal, because these species are becoming more and more, stuck to having to go, hey, I need to go to the feeder to fill up. And so it's changing behaviors over time. And I think that's a huge issue, because I'll tell you right now what turkeys will do. Turkeys will bring that flock in, and Betsy over here gets picked off by Cooper's hawk. And then they look around and go, hey, Betsy's gone. We got extra feed. We'll come back tomorrow. And next day Ralph gets picked off by a fox. And we're like, well, dang, Ralph's gone. We got a little more food. We'll come back tomorrow. And the next day Joe gets hit. And next thing you know, the whole flock's almost gone because they're focused on a feeder. And then also we're really moving disease out there, concentrating everything. It's like telling everyone, like, hey, why don't y'all go to the toilet bowl today? We're going to eat. How many people want to go to the toilet bowl and eat? I'm going to tell you right now, I don't want to. Maybe y'all want to. We'll have a salad, right? Wash it clean. No, it's not. It's not. So if people think about it that way, maybe it'll stick in their minds like, hey, it's not good. That's number one. Number two, whether you're in a rural setting or even a suburban setting. I know that, John, I had the same NWCO here for a bit, helping trap skunks and coons and everything else around here because people need help. And we're seeing all these mesopredator populations just booming right now because of how we live and the fragmentation. So it's creating an artificial environment for species that we really, consider as nuisance in general. And these same species are having impacts on all ground nesting songbirds, especially turkeys. And so we need to address that. I wish more people would think about, hey, let's get back into trapping again. Even if you're a non-hunter, let someone come out and maybe trap on your property could help you see more species that you desire to see. And so I think those are just a couple of things just right off the top of my head that if I could wave the wand overnight, I would do that, and I think we could see some dramatic changes.
Yeah, of course, having been in an agency arena, and you know this as well, that's stopping feeding is going to take government action, because people voluntarily, they're not going to do it because of the competitive nature. It's like, okay, I'll quit feeding on my farm, but if my neighbors don't, my animals are going to go to their farms, and I'm going to have less opportunity. So it's really going to take the agencies to, have the intestinal fortitude to step up and say, we're going to stop this. It's detrimental to the turkey flock. We don't need to do it anymore. We tried in Kentucky when I was here. You probably remember that we used to have feeding year round, and we went after a baiting ban completely. And I thought I was going to lose my job over it, to be honest with you. And but we got it out of turkey season. So now it's like a window of like from March till, I'm thinking late May, early June, I think, that you can't feed in Kentucky. And they may have tweaked that. It's been a few years since I've been there. But, at one time you could feed year round, and people did. And the other thing is that I often said this, when talking to folks at the agency or hunters, that we've lost the generation that knew how to go into the woods and find game. They've lost their woodsmanship. They lost because all they knew how to do, they were taught, the generations we have now hunting, climb in a deer stand, look at a green field or look at a feeder. And they would, you get a good mass crop and people start complaining about not seeing deer. It's like, well, they're in the woods. They're eating white oaks. They're not coming to your corn feeder when the white oaks on the ground. No, we've decimated the deer herd. No, you haven't. Wait till we have a mass failure. You'll see. They'll come back. But they don't know how to go in the woods and scout and find sign and put a stand in the right place. And all they know is to sit in that same box. And I fall in that same trap. I still know how to do it, but I largely hunt from a box, looking at a field, and, that's just the culture now. But that's the tougher one to change is, how do you, if we went down the road of stopping feeding a wildlife, we may lose so many hunters that we don't have the money to manage the wildlife that we have left, because they just give up because they don't know how to go do it anymore. And I'm not sure we can get that back.
I think it's a transition, man, with anything. I think, people transition into putting the yellow nuggets everywhere. And so I think we could transition back. I'm probably one of the few that still goes out there and does it old school, right? I was out, just harvested a dandy buck, but there was no feeder. There was none of that. It was just old school woodsman knowledge and knowing where deer are. And at that, it's a public land deer. So have fun with that. But yeah, it's I think people just have to get out and experience things. And once they experience it, it's crazy. I've taken guys out before that have only hunted out of a blind and took them on a woods journey chasing turkeys. And literally, I think everyone I've ever taken, which has been quite a few over the years, were like, oh my gosh, I didn't know it was this cool. And just, it's like their minds were blown. But because of media, right, and what people are seeing, that's what they want to do. So here at Turkeys for Tomorrow, we're trying to get people thinking about turkeys year round and trying to do things differently. We're not promoting going and doing the things that everyone else thinks is cool these days. Let's try to get back to how everyone cut their teeth and figured out how to turkey hunt, and trying to get back into that mindset of being a woodsman and having that appreciation. And I think that's how you make change. It's not easy. It's a culture change, but there's a few of us willing to die on that hill to make the culture change.
Yeah. I think, that's right on point that, you may like to hunt, fields and out of blinds. You might like to hunt in the woods, scouting and the old school method. Bottom line is all that goes away if we don't have any turkeys to hunt. Doesn't matter what method you like. Doesn't matter how you like to do it. If the turkeys aren't there because we've driven them to, near extirpation, then nobody hunts them then because there's not anything there to go after. So, talking about, and I keep hearing this term regional decline. And is that because we haven't looked that closely in other parts of the country? Because the fur market's depressed, worldwide. So, the Midwest has just as many predators, if not more, than we do in the Southeast. The West has tons of predators. People aren't taking them for furs. Habitat changes are probably similar. There's more clean farming, there's more aggregation of farms, that sort of thing. So why is it regional? That's the one thing that bothers me. It seems like it would be basically a population-wide decline if it was predators and changes in farming practices and changes in habitat.
Yeah, it's a good question, man. I think it's one that everyone's looking at real closely. The best thing that I saw recently was production. It looks and appears that the production value is much lower in the coastal plain, in the coastal areas in general of the United States. And the first thing that comes to my mind, my biologist brain, is that the habitat structure there is differently. And so you think about growing seasons, much longer growing seasons. If it's not managed well, you have a structure, the understory that's much different. We're seeing a lot of the goblin studies where birds are not being as vocal down the coastal plain as other areas. And it's because vocal birds get picked off. And so I think we're starting to see that because of habitat structure and really the ability for a predator to hide behind every inch to pick something up, that now we have two big facets that's working, like you said earlier, in unison together. Because if you go further north or further west, yeah, there are predators there, but it's wide open. And so birds' behavior there in the western states is so different. You see a mile away, you see something coming. When I was hunting in Oklahoma a couple of years ago, we had a coyote come down the hill. These birds were standing at attention. I had 20 birds in front of me, about 30 yards. And they saw this yote come down the hill. They heard this yote heard the birds and was trying to do a sneak attack, working the wind. And they're periscoping. They saw him, and then they scooted on out. They knew what was up. Now, if we're down in the deep south, I'm gonna tell you right now, you ain't gonna see a coyote a mile away. He's gonna be on you. And I've been in those places where I've hunted down in South Georgia and hunting the swamp, and I've had a bobcat just about land on me, and I just hear something, look over, and I'm like, oh my God, here's a cat, 10 feet away. But they sneak in and they got good cover. And so if I'd have been a bird, it'd pick me off. But it saw my big ugly head and said, no, I ain't doing that. But this is reality, and I think some of that is coming into play for sure. Also look at the southeastern states over time, and we've had the ability to harvest a lot of birds, and people are out for long seasons. And I think over time that has probably played to some additive mortality to the population. Don't know that, but I think when we start adding all this together, and then you get a bait pile in the middle of a thicket where people are putting it down for deer, it's an issue. We have feral pigs galore. I don't know how many. There's some studies on not directly but indirectly saying that we feel like feral pigs is probably impacting some turkey populations locally. I mean, there's a ton of things, but this is just me anecdotally looking at it, and I think it's going to be a little more challenging. So we have to be more proactive in those areas where we got some really open upland hardwood forest. That understory structure component is so different than if you get down the coastal plain. Think about it. So I don't know. I've been around too many places, just looking, thinking like, what is going on? And in my heart, I think that's some of it. So it's a good question. No one really knows yet, but we're about to test the waters.
Well, there's sort of a leading question for me, because one of the things I think that is a regional phenomenon more so than others is prescribed fire. We burn more in the Southeast, which is, and I'm a proponent. I set prescribed fires all the time. I like it. Cheapest way you can put a good habitat on the ground. But, I know there's some concern about, late spring, early summer burns with nesting hens. And to think about, you get outside of the Southeast, Midwest does some burning, but mostly it's ag fields are burning off. The West, they don't put fire on the ground much because they have to fight them. They have to fight wildfires too much. So, that was the one factor I could figure that's sort of regional. And like you see, even coastal plain, you get a lot more burning in the coastal plain. It's easier and safer to burn in the coastal plain than it is in the in the hardwood, rolling hills of Piedmont and the mountains. So, what are you hearing, or what are you seeing on prescribed fire?
So yeah, I'll open up. Yeah, I think the timing of fire is very crucial to what we're doing. And how many times a year do we need to burn, or what's that duration? And so there's a lot of these things to unpack. But yes, there's a lot more prescribed fire down the coastal plain in general, for sure. I have seen a big change. It seems like a lot of the practitioners, and some of this come from the agencies, like growing season burns. And, a lot of the research is showing, and people are not trying to, what we're seeing, and I'll just throw it out there. I think people don't want to push back against fire and go, hey, don't burn. If you can burn any month, burn, right? And a lot of people that are burning in places that are growing season, spring growing season burns happen to be the places where they have problems. However, it's just me. And looking at the science, but if we're trying to set back woody stems and promote a weed community at the disturbance timing, then that time of the year produces super cruddy species, okay? And so if we just change the timing of prescribed fire, no more spring burns, we never have to worry about burning up one nest ever again. The other thing is, if the size of the fire is big and you got a big blacked out landscape, you may not directly kill that hen, but now if she's on a black landscape, she's going to stick out like a sore thumb. And the likelihood of predation well after that, or if she's close to pulling that clutch off and those little poults having to run across the moonscape to survive, it's not good. And so we don't ever talk about the indirect impacts, but those are serious indirect impacts. And so I think that's important. But if we move that fire back into late summer going into fall, man, we can produce a great weed community that, if you're a deer hunter, I'm going to tell you right now, some of the best places I've deer hunted in the deep south is when we've had a growing season fire late summer into the fall, and it starts greening up. About that time, rut and stuff's hitting up. It's getting real good. You got good weed community, and the deer in there just browsing the heck out of it. It's a great, just late season kind of flush of greenery that's good. So it's good weeds. You tend to get better hardwood kill because you have maximum phloem, which there's another fact for you. So whether you're burning or herbicide work or whatever, disturbance that time, you get better kill on things you don't want there. So for me, it's like, it's a no-brainer. Why would we not get practitioners to think that way? Well, the reason why is that, number one, culture. Number two, conditions sometimes may not be as good. They may be more volatile. You get a little bit of cool air and humidity drops real low and you get a super hot fire. So a lot of people are scared of that, and no doubt. The dormant season fires is good to keep things managed. Once you get things at a managed level, burning in the wintertime, great. You keep everything set back. You're on a 2-year interval. This 3 and 4 year interval, even here in Kentucky, if someone's like, hey, I'm going to burn every 3 or 4 years, I'm like, no, you're missing it. Can't stay ahead of it. And so it's getting the mindset right. Every 2-year interval, you need to burn. You'd be looking to burn as much as you can. Smaller blocks are better, just for wildlife species. You got to put a few more breaks in, but long term, there's a lot of benefits. So it's trying to unpack all of that and try to give some good direction for the future of what we need to do with fire. And then it can be great, because I'm going to be honest with you, I've killed a ton of turkeys on fresh burn ground, and man, they love it. Little panicums come up and there's little seeds that look like brown top millet everywhere. Man, that's the place to be.
And the grasshoppers that show up for them too.
Yeah, oh Lord, yeah, insect abundance is through the roof, and so yeah, it's pretty doggone good. But yeah, I don't think people, when you start unpacking it, I've even, and I'm not going to talk about the state agency, but let's just say I've even been on one of those fires in a place where folks were like, hey, we got to catch up with our numbers. Okay. We got to catch up with the numbers on how many acres we burned and all this jazz. And I saw a WMA in Georgia that we burned 95% of the upland. And it's a place where we used to harvest a lot of turkeys on it, okay? One of my favorite places to turkey hunt. And within a couple years, that turkey population went skyrocketed downward and has never recovered. And so you keep the same level of pressure, but you basically just crush nesting habitat for a couple of years. You know what happens? Production goes down to the dirt level, but you keep quote unquote harvest at the same level. Same number of hunters coming, killing birds. your population just doesn't recover overnight. And so I saw that happen. It's funny. I in a discussion with the lady there just this year, and they're like, "How do you know about that stuff?" I said, "I was there when that happened." I said, "Sucked." Anywho.
Yeah, sometimes unburned, no burn's better than a bad burn.
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely.
I just sit here enjoying the conversation and realizing how complex it is. There's so many variables, but I'm very appreciative to have wildlife biologists like you and John and all the rest of the folks that are working on this type of stuff. Turkeys for Tomorrow doing a great job. Again, hunters willing to help out, general population willing to help out, and but they need the science behind it. It can't just be somebody's opinion, and somebody's got to do the science. And I appreciate what you guys are doing. How can folks support Turkeys for Tomorrow so you can continue to do what you're doing and find the answers for the future of species like turkey, and where to get more information on you guys? And
Absolutely. You can find us on just about every social platform out there. Turkeysfortomorrow.org is our website. Come on there. We have events kind of popping up everywhere. We're having some conservation dinners. We're doing a lot of different types of events and places just to create awareness. We're trying to stand up some private landowner cooperatives, working with people at a local level. And so plug in, check us out online, and literally we will connect with you. We try to thrive on the customer service aspect, and my guys are like, "Man, why do we got to call every single person back?" I'm like, "Because this is how we make a difference. We figure out what's going on." And so it's been really good. And so we have a lot of people wanting to help. We have big research projects we're standing up in across the nation. And so we need help. Anywhere you want to help, we'll plug you in. We always talk about the 3 T's, right? We'll take your time, your talents, or your treasures. So bring it on.
Well, Loopy, appreciate you coming on. It's actually, I've been in the policy. I'm a wildlife biologist, been in the policy arena for so long. I seldom get to do this. So I appreciate you spending some extra time talking turkey biology with us. It's actually kind of refreshing. And it does tie into connecting with conservation because they work off grants. They work off memberships. They work off people who buy licenses. All these people are contributing to conservation, and we appreciate what you do. Glad you're out there doing it. Keep up the good work, and however we can help you, you let us know. We're definitely going to have you back on again. We figured this thing out. So, absolutely.
Well, thanks for having me on, for sure.
Yeah, thanks for being with us. To our viewers, thanks for listening. If you like this podcast, click the thumbs up button for us. Subscribe to us. That helps us. It'll also let you know when the next one drops. And other than that, we'll see you in the woods or on the water. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Connecting with Conservation podcast. Please do us a favor and tell your buddies, friends, family, and others about what you've learned here today. If you like what you heard, come on back anytime and listen to another episode of the Connecting with Conservation podcast.